of the counting of the Omer, a period of spiritual preparation as we go from Passover to Shavuot and prepare on Shavuot to receive wisdom and the Torah. So here in this journey, we have been leading up the last couple weeks into this week, Rachamim, or compassion. This week, we will focus on compassion. Week 1, we talked about chesed, kindness, and we talked about developing empathy as the first step of compassion. And last week, we talked about gevura, which is strength and boundaries and the role that plays in compassion. And now we've arrived into Rachamim, the coming together of chesed and gevura, of kindness and strength. And as we look at Rachamim, I want to elevate this journey that we've been on, where we have gone from empathy and concern and we are moving into compassion. Compassion is empathy and concern that moves into action. Caring that is expressed in doing. Dr. Kelly McGonigal has a beautiful definition of compassion that I want to share with you. Compassion, she says, is not, I feel bad for you. Compassion is, I believe it is possible to relieve suffering or to find joy, meaning, connection, hope in the midst of suffering. So again, I want to say that compassion is a process that begins with the cultivation of empathy and concern, but it doesn't end there. It's really important that it begins there, that we take the time to develop our sense of empathy and understanding for what other people are going through, for what our own experience is, for what is going on in the world around us. But if we just stay at empathy, it doesn't move into where we need to go, which is compassion. And when we arrive into compassion, one thing we need to get centered on is, what are the actions that I could take? The good thing for us is that compassionate actions are endless. They go on forever. There is no lack of compassionate actions we can take. And then this week, I want to invite you to think about 1, maybe 2, at the most 3. But really, friends, if you do 1, that is wonderful. What is a compassionate action you can take this week? In week 1, we talked a lot about how we relate to the people around us, our closest ones, in relationship to them, and how we can develop empathy. Last time, we talked about having some self-compassion. And this week, I want to bring all that in. Compassion for others, compassion for self. And also, I want to bring in the community around us and our greater world to think of how we want to be in compassionate action. One thing that's really true in our world today is we have a lot of sources of information telling us about all of the problems and the pain and the despair of the world. We hear it in podcasts and the newspapers from friends and neighbors. We hear it all the time. And some of us get rather obsessed with hearing and learning the latest thing. Did you hear this? Did you read this article? Have you heard this? It is so overwhelming that sometimes I think what we forget to do is the part of compassion where we step forward and take some action. Judaism on the whole, and certainly the practice of Musar, which elevates these midot, has what we call a bias towards action. It's important to contemplate and to learn and to become aware, but really compassion is asking us to act. So I wondered if you would do an inventory of all the time that you spend in a week learning about the problems of the world, whether that's watching news or listening to news or reading articles. And if you put that on one side of a piece of paper, and then if you put the other side, the amount of time that you spend actually taking action in the world to alleviate the suffering and the pain and the harm, I have a feeling that one side would be a lot more. And of course, it likely will be, right? We listen to shows, that's a certain commitment, listening to podcasts. But I would like for you to think about how to make the inventory more in a balance, so that what we learn about the world is balanced with what we do about it. So, as I said at the beginning, there's no end of compassionate action you could take. So the first step is to really think about what's a place in my community, with a dear friend, with a beloved, with the world around me, where I want to take compassionate action. And then make a commitment and do it. Do a compassionate action this week. You might say, I don't know how to engage, but if you start with the topic that you're most interested in helping, and maybe it's as simple as checking in on your neighbor next door, or taking food to someone who is in a period of loss and mourning, or if it's getting together to organize for better schools and commitment to public education and to supporting it, there's just no end. There is no end. So what you might want to do if you don't know where to start is to reach out to others who do the kind of work you're interested in and ask them, how can I get involved? Again, there's no end. It's just getting over the barrier where we sit in pools of concern and worry and sometimes despair, and need to now move ourselves towards rachamim, into action. In the Torah, the most repeated commandment is to take care of the orphan, the widow, the stranger. It's the thing that's said most often. There is a reason why. It's because we must remind ourselves to not become numb, to not become immune to the problems around us. It's true that when we're in a compassion practice, it often opens our heart even more deeply to suffering. But remember, again, that compassion is not just saying, oh, they're suffering. It's saying, what am I going to do to take some responsibility and take action to relieve suffering? So may you do so this week in 1 to 3 meaningful actions. And may you have a compassionate week.
If I needed you, would you come to me? Would you come to me? For to ease my pain. If you needed me, I would come to you. I would swim the seas for to ease your pain. While the night's forlorn and the morning's born, and the morning shines with the light of love, and you'll miss sunrise if you close your eyes, and that would break my heart in two. If I needed you, would you come to me? Would you come to me? For to ease my pain. If you needed me, I would come to you. I would swim the seas for to ease your pain. I would swim the seas